A general Google search says, what is Sharia? Sharia is Islam's legal system. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what Google says. And it's an absolute straightforward answer.
The legal position in British law is very clear. Individual British citizens of any faith or none can appoint arbitrators on a voluntary basis to look into disputes. These could be financial disputes, marital disputes.
The only thing that I want to highlight is that you maintain. It is very important that you are very clear what the core principles are and that you never turn your back on them.
Law today, by the way, is culture tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Law today is culture tomorrow. Once you make that legal, it will be a choice that people can make. It will be a cultural choice.
It's more generally, it's the paradigm.
Norms,
It's the paradigm by which.
And when you keep saying that to the community, it feels like it's legal when you keep saying it's the legal system.
The decisions those arbitrators reach are not part of British law. They're no more or less legally binding than any other private contract.
The practice of Sharia in our communities as being a sign that actually the United Kingdom is becoming an ever greater divided country.
A recent report, quite controversial, has now highlighted the fact that Britain, in the Western world, is the capital for Sharia courts or councils, stating that there are 85 such active Sharia councils in the UK. We often in the media call these Sharia courts, but I've been corrected by Mustafa Varsi and Jacob that these are not quite courts. But then it's interesting because there are judgments that happen as well. So I'm going to ask you about that. But on Out of Britain today, we're discussing about Sharia law, Sharia courts, the relevance of this practice that has been happening for ages, where particularly for family-related matters, where men knock the doors of Sharia councils for advice, sometimes even judgments on how to act further, the relevance of these to exist in a country such as Britain, which has its own law, is established, and is one of the oldest democracies. And this, like I said at the onset, I'd like to clarify, is going to be an open, balanced conversation. And if somebody here feels that these Sharia councils should continue, should exist, then I'm going to ask why and whether you'd seek regulation or reformation even. So we are coming to you from London in Pictel House, which is a think tank. Mustafa Varsi, you're hosting us. Thank you very much as chairman of Pictel House, which is a think tank.
Welcome.
Thank you. Jacob Williams, who is also a co-director at Pictel House. With us is also Ben Habib, who is now chairman of Great British Political Action
Committee, yeah.
Tell us in a line what that is.
So effectively it's a think tank, but with money and a preparedness to put pressure on political parties. It doesn't plead with political parties to do the right thing, it puts pressure on them.
Okay, excellent. And the fact that you have money helps.
Exactly.
Yasmin Whitaker Khan, who I've met during one of your very solid presentations on Big Bottom Begums, which is an Instagram profile. But you, of course, are a presenter, writer, and a youth worker. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Just for starters, shall we begin with what Sharia councils are? For especially non-Muslims like me, it's very helpful to know what are these, and in the community, does literally 9 out of 10 women knock the door of Sharia councils for advice? Could you tell us what it is?
Do you want to
Jacob,
feel this?
on you go.
It's very important to understand, actually, that these Sharia councils are voluntary arbitration tribunals. Now, there are practical problems with how they operate, and we can come on to those shortly. But the legal position in British law is very clear. Individual British citizens of any faith or none can appoint arbitrators on a voluntary basis to look into disputes. These could be financial disputes, marital disputes. The decisions those arbitrators reach are not part of British law. They're no more or less legally binding than any other private contract. So when we hear these demands to abolish Sharia courts, what we're actually hearing is a kind of authoritarian move to abolish the basic British common law right to seek voluntary arbitration. So as long as everyone is fully informed of what's going on, these Sharia councils are simply forums for voluntary agreements.
It is important to highlight the non-legal nature
Yes.
of Sharia councils as they currently operate. And I think that calling them Sharia courts in the law is incredibly misleading, not only to the British public at large, but also to the people who interact with Sharia courts. In fact, it further entrenches the potential for misrepresentation that they themselves often maliciously but often accidentally engage in by presenting their judgments, and I will use air quotes here, judgments, as having some kind of legal weight or authority.
Yeah.
Largely
That's exactly why the question. Yes, it's loosely called as courts because they're not courts recognized by state. But a general Google search says, what is Sharia? Sharia is Islam's legal system. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what Google says, and it's an absolute straightforward answer.
It's more generally, it's the paradigm.
Norms,
It's the paradigm by which.
And when you keep saying that to the community, it feels like it's legal when you keep saying it's the legal system. There's also a line which says it is derived from the Quran, Islam's holy book, as well as from many sacred teachings, where an answer cannot be derived directly from where these come from. Religious leaders and scholars may give rulings, judgments as guidance. So it's funny, it says it's guidance, but these are rulings and judgments on a particular question or a topic.
That's right, and this is fundamentally no different to many other systems of religious ethical norms, Jewish halakha, Catholic canon law. Many religions. Many religions have sets of.
Hinduism has it.
Exactly.
It's in Christianity.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
sure.
I think the interesting thing from my perspective, and I'm not a Muslim, my dad's a Muslim. My mother's English, Church of England, so I'm a bit of both. So I understand a little bit about Sharia, not a lot, but a little bit about Sharia law. The interesting thing from my perspective is the cultural significance that Sharia councils have taken on in the UK. The fact that their number are exploding. I think there were about 30 in 2018. They're now 85, as you said. And this has gone hand in hand with an explosion of immigration to the United Kingdom, about which J.D. Vance spoke so eloquently in Munich the other day. And I think a regulatory and legal framework which puts a protected status, not just around ethnic minorities in this country and religious minorities, not just Muslim ethnic minorities and religious minorities, but all ethnic minorities, religious minorities, transgender, ideology and all of that. It all gets this protection through diversity, equity and inclusion. The Equalities Act is at the foundation of this, and on a company law basis, the Companies Act 2006 has a whole section on social justice from which companies are operating this kind of thing as well. And in the onboarding, if you like, of mass immigration to the country, which has been given this protected status, what we've effectively created in the United Kingdom is multicultural silos of people all practicing their own cultures, their own religions, their cultures, speaking their own language. And what we've turned our back on, I'm moving the conversation on a little bit. What we've turned our back on, and for me, which is the crucial issue, is any form of attempt to have a culturally integrated United Kingdom based on our Christian cultural roots. And so I see the Sharia law, the practice of Sharia, I wouldn't say law, the practice of Sharia in our communities, and I use communities in the plural for obvious reasons, as being a sign that actually the United Kingdom is becoming an ever greater divided country.
Let's bring it back to Sharia. The reason being, yes, you said it, that there are 85 something, you didn't say the word worrying, but it's sounding like Britain now has the most number of Sharia councils / courts in Britain. We don't know whether the number is 85. It could be more. It could be less. It could be a suggested number. But it certainly is a number that needs to be recognized at this stage, because it's 85 and that's a big number for a country such as Britain. The question is...
Why does it need to be recognised?
Because it is a big number. It is a big number. The reason I say that is because there are reports suggesting that this is a parallel legal system that is running in a country such as Britain, which we know champions democracy, and in a world where increasingly we are becoming scarily nationalist in our world, this is the time we need to stop and recognize whether there is further space to enhance, further strengthen and empower democracies. Having said that,
In what
Suggesting-
sense is this a parallel legal system?
well,
I was
it's
just
being
quite curious.
suggested. It's being suggested by
But people suggest
several-
all kinds of things, right?
Yes,
that doesn't
yes,
mean
and
that
that's
they
why
have
we're
any
here
bearing
to
on
clarify.
reality.
Yes, so that's why we're here to clarify. First, we clarify whether there are 85. The reason we are here is because it's worth discussing whether Sharia laws need to exist, need to continue to run, and if they do,
the sad thing-
then
very strange.
The sad
if they
thing for
continue
me-
to, then should there be reformation?
The
Should
sad thing for me is that
Yes.
we've got any form of Sharia in the United Kingdom.
Well,
I think
no.
if people come to the United Kingdom, they should buy into our traditional cultural values and systems. And,
I think
you know,
But a traditional cultural value in this country
Yeah.
is I mean, you know, that in some sense is greatly responsible for the growth and development and strength of this nation and its culture and its history is an emphasis on individual rights, individual liberty, and freedom,
that is
freedom of association, freedom of religious practice.
No, what
Right?
you're,
And so
referring
even
to.
though that undergirds, even though Christian values undergird a lot of practice in.
So what you're referring to is actually quite a modern phenomena.
I trace
in
it
the
back to
United
Locke
Kingdom.
and the Enlightenment.
No, you can only trace back what you've just said to 1998 and the creation of the Human Rights Act,
Freedom of religion?
which gave
No.
which
There's
gave
no toleration
which
in
gave
1680s.
But what has happened since 1998 is that, as I say, it has been in lockstep with the protection and promotion. There's been a protected status afforded to minority
I think that's fair,
ethnicities in
actually.
this country.
Yes, yeah.
And there's been no attempt for integration. And what we will see, whether you gentlemen like it or not, what we will see is greater division in the United Kingdom unless the definition of a nation state, the definition of a society is cultural homogeneity. We've got to have a common culture. We don't have a common culture. And the fact that the number of Sharia councils are increasing says to me the problem's getting worse.
Right.
And back in 2018, there was a report published in which there were some steps advocated, one of which was that, for example, whenever a Muslim individual gets married in the United Kingdom, it should be a requirement that it's accompanied by a civil wedding at the same place.
Introduce Sania Qureshi, who's just joined us.
Hi,
Hi.
afternoon, everyone. I do apologize for my extreme lateness.
No problem at all. Sania, you work so closely with the diaspora.
Yes.
Tell us about your opinion on Sharia Council. In one line, if you were to say, what do you think should happen? Should we continue with Sharia councils in the UK? Keep them, not keep them? If we keep them, what?
So in a nutshell, yes, we keep them. There are just under 3 million Muslims, British Muslims, residing in this country. And they have interaction with Islamic jurisprudence in different stages of their life, whether it's marriage, birth, death, inheritance, marriage, especially is a real contention because people go into multiple marriages where polygamy is illegal in this country. And I absolutely agree with the point the gentleman made earlier. There are women who are having their nikahs and assuming that they are registered and they are legally wed, and they're not. It is actually illegal to carry out a nikah without registering it. So this misconduct is happening. It is not
So
the
how do
fact
you-
that Sharia law is abusing women. The use of Sharia has been, in some cases, abusive.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So
There's a
how do you
difference.
propose? We will. I'm going to ask you this question. How do you propose we keep it and still have women access state rights, human rights? But let me talk about this report Jacob Williams and Picton House brought out on Sharia courts. Women are at risk, but there's no such thing as Sharia courts. It's Sharia councils. Picton investigates Sharia courts and they find a lack of transparency, safeguarding, but also no evidence that these councils operate as legal authorities. Worries about growing number of so-called Sharia courts in Britain are widespread, as prominent calls for abolition of these institutions for oppressing women and children. Now, we are talking about, there are multiple subjects here. There's one
Huge
that-
multiple subjects.
multiple subjects here, and we've progressed to some of the really large subjects on immigration, Britain, democracy, equal rights for all. but at the same time having space for all, having expression for all, having multiple people practice their faith and be somewhat moderated in this approach. So here's a woman who works with the diaspora, another one who knows a lot of your colleagues and friends have utilized services from Sharia councils who have felt let down, right? So at this level, you're saying keep it. What are you saying?
I'm saying if it's a support system that is there, just like the Jewish community have, the Hindu community have, I've got no issues with it. It's when it's not explained to the communities of what their role is, what their responsibilities are, and what rights those people have to use it. That's where, because we forget, I think we're going Muslim, Sharia, Sharia, Muslim, Muslim, but really lots of communities, the Jewish community, if you go to Stamford Hill, they practice
But there are 200,000 Jews in the United Kingdom.
It's not about numbers.
It's about
it's not about the numbers. It's about the access of information.
The numbers make a big difference because it has a direct bearing on the settlement of our various.
So are you saying
various communities around the United Kingdom?
But then, if you're not banning, but you're saying they should not exist.
No, I'm not. What I'm saying is that it's a sad reflection on the governance of this country, particularly over the last five. It's accelerated over the last 5 years, but over the last, since 1997, since Tony Blair came to being Prime Minister, and we bought into the liberal global order that you and I were discussing beforehand, and the Human Rights Act, which is now embodied into law. Law today, by the way, is culture tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Law today is culture tomorrow. I'm going to digress very quickly. Assisted dying bill, people think it's some kind of mechanism by which you can just get rid of people who are terminally ill. Once you make that legal, it will be a choice that people can make. It will be a cultural choice. And the thing about Sharia councils is that if you recognize them, if you give them regulated status, if you make sure that all the people who use them are well advised, etc., what you're actually doing is embedding Sharia in the United Kingdom.
I'm not giving them regulated status.
So are you saying what are you suggesting?
What I'm suggesting is a completely different approach to the way we deal with our various communities, which is we need a positive vision, a positive program for integration in the United Kingdom for people who've done. We do not have it. We do not have it.
Speak English to describe the same.
No, we do not. No, Jacob, we absolutely do not have it. The regulatory and legal framework that creates diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it is a regulatory and legal framework founded on the Equalities Act and the Companies Act 2006. So it proliferates through our educational establishments, our employment law, everything absolutely sets aside minorities from the majority, and it is the antithesis, if you don't mind me saying so, of democracy. Because what we should
special protection. I think you both agree.
It makes you feel better, by the way. We've also publicly opposed blasphemy laws that have been called for by Muslims.
High five me on that one.
Yeah, there we go. So what I want to highlight, right, is that I actually don't think that protected status should be provided, and that minority groups and because if you start putting the tools on the table to weaponize, censoriousness, precisely. So minority communities of all flavors will absolutely grab and then do this, right?
So
the only thing that I want to highlight is that you maintain. It is very important that you are very clear what the core principles are, and that you never turn your back on them.
Is it hard for a woman in the Muslim community to go directly to a British system which is in place? Or is it more comforting for many women to be able to, who are vulnerable, by the way, who've gone through perhaps an incident, is it easier to go to a community leader or a community known practice?
Yes. And it's completely luck by chance that that community gatekeeper or scholar or imam is of good thinking and is sort of amenable, approachable. So that is a question mark.
That's a big question mark. And that's what you're
But my answer to your question is yes, there is a need for both routeways.
Yeah. Okay.
One doesn't take over the other.
Why is there a need for both?
Okay, so when you have a nikah and you go through a divorce, and I can talk from my own experience, I have a civil dissolution of marriage and I'll have an Islamic dissolution of marriage. I don't go to the British Civil Court to get my Islamic dissolution, right? I have to go through the Sharia Council. And I had a very good experience. Not every woman's experience is good. So that's another layer to the debate. The point is, both those elements are important for anyone who goes the Muslim route.
Welcome back. Just to clarify that we're all still friends on this table.
Yeah, of course.
We've got 45 seconds each for closing remarks. Stick please to the subject, the relevance of Sharia law in the United Kingdom, which is home to several such councils. Jacob, we'll start with you.
Sharia law in the United Kingdom is just a set of ethical norms that Muslims voluntarily choose to follow. And as part of that, some Muslims choose to appoint voluntary arbitrators to deal with marital or financial disputes. Now, where there's vulnerability, where women or children are not aware of their legal rights, there absolutely has to be sensible intervention by the state, by the law, to make sure they are aware of their rights. And I think the overwhelming majority of Muslims, and we know this, we've done the surveys, will support these measures, as will nearly all of the British public, so we can move towards a sensible society that reflects our basic values as British
And
citizens.
additionally, which will allow...
That's an advice shared. Is that something that can be implemented? And do you have a how to do it?
I genuinely do think so. I do think that it can be implemented. I think that if you were to go to communities and say that the government is in fact willing to work with you as councils, but that you have duty of care, that they would largely be in support of it, because it makes them additionally feel like they don't have to give up, or they don't have to resist the state. They feel like they can work with the state, that they can in fact buy into the society without having to sacrifice a certain degree of authenticity. I think that a lot of these issues come from the fact that the Muslim community largely feels like it is being, quote unquote, unfairly targeted, or particularly targeted. This sense of being targeted worsens the sense of social alienation, and in fact what is partly what results in people coping, or communities coping, by looking for muscular ideologies that only further worsen the problem. The general feeling is that people need to be shown the blessings and benefits of liberal democracy, and that we do so in a principled, restrained, patient way, and that all good things will arise. As have happened with Catholics in the past, by the way,
Absolutely.
in this country.
Yep.
Liberal democracy, which Britain is, many have said here that it's a norm. Is it relevant?
So the two words liberal democracy, we roll them off as if they're, totally understood. Liberalism is in tension with democracy. Liberalism is the championing and promotion of the individual. Democracy is the championing and the promotion of the majority rights, the majority interest. And they stand against each other. And we've had a great healthy tension, which is allowed through liberalism and many other great thinkers and so on who've come through the liberal path to emancipate women, to put women on an equal footing with men. So liberalism is an important part of our ecosystem, political constitutional ecosystem. But liberalism has gone too far, and it's manifested itself in the diversity, equity and inclusion, progressive discrimination, which is just discrimination as far as I'm concerned. And liberalism needs a check on it, and democracy has been set aside to a very significant extent by muscular liberalism. And democracy needs to be heard, and democracy requires, for the democratic unit that is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, democracy requires that we have a settled culture, that we have homogeneity, shared values, shared cultural norms. And I see the increase of Sharia councils, the increase in number, the proliferation of them, actually is a sign that multiculturalism in this country is not working.
Okay, Yasmin?
Right.
Relevant?
Relevant. I think the Sharia Council, like other communities have their own councils, is valid and needed. I don't think it's a matter of the state to get involved. I think that the Sharia councils themselves need to take responsibility to make sure that there is a system that is organised and people are well informed and within human rights and the law of the land. I think if the Sharia Council practitioners, who may be self-appointed, can behave irresponsibly and should be legally accountable.
Sonia?
Yes, I do believe Sharia law, Sharia councils have a place in British society. Islamic jurisprudence is important to the 3+ million Britishers residing here. It is a set of ethics, as our colleague rightly said, and it is accessible, and it should be accessible in a regulated manner so that people don't fall foul of the law and do understand their rights, which are aligned to the British justice system.
Okay, great. Let's leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us,
Thank you
all
so
of
much.
you. And if you have opinions, comments to share, please write to me. And thank you very much for joining us on Out of Britain. Radhika Iyer signing off from London.